hazardous materials incidents. The spectacular events receive spectacular media coverage. Everyone hears about them. But for every major incident, there are dozens around the country every day that affect local communities just like yours. The incident may be small. It may receive no outside attention, but there is still the potential for injury and property damage. As a first responder, the next hazardous materials incident could affect you and your community. What happens in the first few minutes of a hazardous materials incident can determine the outcome of the event. The first responders' actions are critical to the outcome of the incident and to the community involved. You are the key person when you are first on the scene.
Law enforcement officers, emergency medical services personnel. Regardless of your role in an emergency situation, the first responder on the scene of a hazardous materials incident is faced with some immediate challenges. You are of no use as a rescuer if you end up having to be rescued. So first, you must protect yourself. Your first line of protection is your safe approach to the scene. Resist the urge to rush in. Know what you're getting into, and use proper protective equipment at all times. Initially, you should assume that each incident involves hazardous materials and act accordingly. Prepare yourself to be safe. Identify the hazard, both to protect yourself and to guide you in the appropriate response to the problem. The scene must be safely secured to prevent danger to bystanders and reduce the impact of the incident on the surrounding area. A secure scene is a safer scene for all concerned. This is one call that you're not going to be able to handle alone, or in the traditional way you deal with most emergencies in your community. Do not hesitate to call for more help. It is important to obtain appropriate information. Advise your headquarters to call Chemtrec for specific product information and for assistance from the manufacturer. Advise your headquarters to contact the appropriate agencies with hazardous materials responsibilities. Your safety may depend on assistance from other agencies, so make those notifications as soon as possible. The key to safe handling of any hazardous materials incident is to minimize exposure to the chemical involved. If you must enter the scene, then you must have and use all of the proper protective equipment. You must also have sufficient information about the nature of the product involved. Don't approach the hazardous materials site unless it is absolutely necessary for rescue or urgent fire suppression. If you must enter the hazardous materials incident area, ensure your safety by spending as little time as possible in the exposure or contact area. So keep in mind everything you've learned in your own departmental training, but never forget hazardous materials change the rules of the game. We've all been trained to take quick action in an emergency, to respond and to deal with a situation. But a hazardous materials incident may be the time when quick action could put you out of action. In a hazardous materials incident, the right action is the safest, not necessarily the quickest action.
Rescue 7, respond. Report of a two-vehicle accident on the farm road near James Pond. Timeout, 11:45.
A quick response, but not the safe response. This crew is in danger. Any possible victims are in danger, and so is the environment. The hazardous materials queues have not been heated. Close placement of the apparatus runs the risk of ignition from the heat of the engine and exhaust pipes. As you know, there can also be many other sources of ignition at the scene. All emergency responders must be aware that what might be standard procedure under normal conditions might be the wrong action in a hazardous materials incident. The crew has now been exposed to the leaking material without knowing what it is, what the hazards are, or what protective equipment is needed. The scene is not secure. Environmental damage is occurring. The hazards have now been extended beyond the scene. A common type of hazardous materials incident, but as you've seen, one with lots of potential problems, but problems that can be avoided. Let's take another look.
Engine 7's on the scene. We have a car involved with a tank trailer with a leak. Have all units hold up till we find out what we have. Engine 7 to dispatch. We have a tanker broadsided. The tanker contains a flammable liquid, chemical ID number 1301. There is a visible leak and runoff. Request police assistance for traffic and scene control. Advise environmental services and Chemtrack. Engine 7 to dispatch. We have verification from the shipping papers that the product is vinyl acetate. V-I-N-Y-L-A-C-E-T-A-T-E. It's being shipped by Sam's Chemical out of Dover, Delaware to Carl's Chemical in Norfolk, Virginia. Be advised we will follow guide number 26 of the Emergency Response Guidebook until you advise further information and instructions.
Engine 7, Chemtrack advises, use a fog line to keep fumes from the product down.
The crew is protecting the environment by... The situation is now under control. The crew is properly protected, the scene is isolated and secure. The officer resisted the urge to rush in. Safety of responding personnel is critical. The scene was checked out from a safe distance. The crew made a safe, upwind approach, knowing the hazards and equipped with proper protective gear. The first responders assumed danger and made sure that the appropriate identification was made and the right, safe action was taken. By taking immediate action to secure the scene, the hazard was confined to the immediate area. The environmental damage was limited, and the safety of bystanders and the first responders was assured. By using the Emergency Response Guidebook and referring to the shipping papers, initial safe action was taken. By calling for assistance from Chemtrack, calling in more units, and getting appropriate backup, this first responding crew has set the stage for effective control of the incident. When it was determined that approach had to be made to the scene, entry to the site was done with proper personal protective equipment, and the crew avoided prolonged exposure to the hazardous material. In this incident, no fire was involved, but if there had been fire, it is even more important to approach the scene with caution and take the time to determine whether your actions will produce the desired results or create a bigger problem. If the vinyl acetate had been involved in a fire, putting that fire out may have been the wrong thing to do. If fire is involved in a hazardous materials incident, there is another serious issue to be addressed. Is rescue your immediate problem? And if it is, you may face the toughest of all decisions. Is rescue really possible with the resources you have? Is there really a way to help? When you're first on the scene, your initial source of information about potential hazards ought to be the Department of Transportation's Emergency Response Guidebook for Hazardous Materials Incidents. Information in this book can help you protect yourself, make a safe approach to the scene, identify the hazards, secure the scene, and take appropriate initial action. The guidebook is organized for quick reference. The first section of Yellow Pages provides an ID number, the chemical ID number, the number which you can get from the placard on the transporting vehicle or from the shipping papers. The next column provides a guide number for appropriate action, and the final column lists the name of the materials assigned to that ID number. Once you have determined the correct guide page number, turn to it. These are the pages with the orange stripe at the top. Here you will find specific information about the potential fire or explosion and health hazards presented by a particular class of chemicals. Further down the page, there's specific fire suppression and containment information and first aid procedures. The guidebook also contains blue pages, which are an alphabetical listing by chemical name in case you do not have an ID number. These pages also provide the appropriate guide number and the ID number. The information in the Emergency Response Guidebook is intended to provide quick initial reference, but it is still important to contact Chemtrec to obtain more specific handling instructions for the products involved. Bulk tank truck and tank car shipments of hazardous materials have a 4-digit number on the placard or on an orange panel, which you can then look up in the Emergency Response Guidebook. If the vehicle contains a placard without an ID number or an orange panel, and the shipping papers are not available to identify the name of the material, turn to the back of the Emergency Response Guidebook and compare the placard with those illustrated on these two pages. Use the guide page number that is listed under the appropriate placard for your initial response. Shipping papers are required for hazardous materials transported by highway, water, rail, and air. Look for them. On truck shipments, the driver will have the manifest or waybill. If the driver is not present or unable to help you, these papers should be found in the cab, on the driver's seat, or in the pocket on the driver's side door. On rail shipments, the waybill is with the train crew. Check with the train crew when you are first on the scene. Each rail car carries reporting letters and numbers. If you can't identify the product any other way, these letters and numbers may be a way for Chemtrec to identify the product. Some tank cars may have the name of the product stenciled on both sides of the car. Whenever possible, the shipping papers will be your most valuable source of information. Placards can give you basic information and warning, but small shipments and mixed loads may not have a placard. If the shipment does not have a placard, use shipping papers or whatever means necessary to find out what you're dealing with before you rush into action. Some loads might be identified by the dangerous placard, which may identify a mixed load of more than one hazardous material.
How's it going today?
It's going pretty good.
You got some kind of fluid leaking out of the rear of your trailer.
I'll be darned. That'll take care of a good day.
Yeah, what are you carrying?
I got some paint and some sulfuric acid on there.
Let me see your driver's license. Where are you coming from?
Coming out of Philadelphia. Is that
Let's
okay?
go back here and take a look at it. See what we got. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Did you get some? Come on. What kind of fumes are they coming out of there?
Sulfuric acid.
Have a seat. Have a seat. I'll get rescued. Scout 830. Scout 830. Scout 830, I have a tractor trailer truck stopped at Route 50 in West Ox. It's going to be carrying chemical fumes coming out of the rear. I'm going to need fire and rescue. The driver is injured. Driver is injured. How you feeling now? Feeling a little better? You getting a little more air?
No.
Looks like those things are in pretty bad shape there.
Yeah.
Who packed those things?
That was shipping load.
Okay, look, here they come. I'm gonna go meet with them and explain to them a little bit about what's going on, okay?
All right.
You just stay right here.
Okay.
Try to breathe.
Yeah.
Stay
All
calm, okay?
Yeah.
Just hang tight, okay? You got a gentleman right over here. I don't know what the heck he's got in here. He said something about sulfuric acid or something like that. Okay. He's gonna need medical attention over there. I'll try to get some more traffic, okay? Okay. It's right over there. Scout 830. I'm going to need 2 additional units for traffic, one at West Ox Road and one at Route 50. We're going to have to block off traffic. I rescue on the way, on the scene.
The officer did not ask the driver for the shipping papers and was therefore unable to advise the rescuers about the hazards of this shipment. The driver is covered with a white powder, a fungicide, about which the crew has not been informed.
A routine rescue, now a hazardous materials incident and a contamination incident. Now the victims and the rescuers have something in common. They are all contaminated by the spilled chemical product. Warnings were ignored. Quick action was taken, but not the safe action for this kind of incident. Let's look at this incident again, keeping the rules for safety in mind.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
You have some type of fluid leaking out of the rear of your trailer.
I'll be darned.
What are you carrying back there?
I got some sulfuric acid and some paint.
Could I look at your papers? Sure. And I'm going to need to see your driver's license and registration also. Where are you coming from?
Coming out of Philadelphia.
When was the last time you made a stop?
Up at the rest area. Had to take a short break.
Did you notice anything leaking at that time?
No.
Nothing?
Okay then.
All right. All right, we definitely got something leaking out of it right now.
All right, let's go take a look at it.
Well, why don't you stay here, and I'll make some checks, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
This time, the officer has obtained information about the truck's load. When the driver becomes contaminated, the officer is prepared.
Scout 830.
Scout 830.
Scout 830, the vehicle I've stopped has contained several hazardous materials. The driver has been contaminated and the fumes are being released. I'm going to need rescue dispatch and 2 additional units for traffic.
Scout 838, 4850 will be dispatched. Fire rescue has been notified. 1550.
10-4, advise them to approach from the south end. Also, advise when you're ready to copy for shipping materials.
Stand by 186. Scout 830, go ahead with your traffic.
Scout 830, advise Chemtrack the materials are paint, which is UN 1263. That's Uniform November 1263. Sulfuric acid, which is a corrosive material, UN 1830. That's Uniform November 1830. Last material is an agricultural fungicide.
Ambulance 34 is on the scene, Paradox. Looks like we got some kind of chemical.
Using the shipping papers, the police officer is able to provide information to his dispatcher, which will give the necessary information to Chemtrack to provide assistance.
Papers off of him. He's been contaminated. We opened the door, one of the barrels fell off.
Also, if you can, we'd like you to start stopping traffic up here about a quarter of a mile back or so.
I've got units on the way for the other side.
Okay, Sam, why don't we go ahead and get suited up?
The officer was able to use the shipping papers to provide valuable and accurate on-the-scene information to his dispatcher and to the ambulance crew.
that? What happened? Okay, you got acid on you?
No, I breathed some of it.
You breathed some of it. No, don't rub it.
Here.
Are you doing okay?
Yeah, I have trouble breathing.
All right, could you lay down for me?
Yeah.
The patient is stable, and until further information is available, the ambulance crew is following safe procedure. Another situation under control. The ambulance crew is safe. The patient is getting appropriate treatment. The slight delay in actually beginning care is important to ensure the safety of all concerned. Further caution will be taken to avoid contaminating the ambulance during transport. The hospital will be notified, and if necessary, the decontamination protocol will be used in handling the patient and ensuring that the ambulance has been properly cleaned before going back in service. The victim may be washed down at the scene prior to transport in order to reduce the effect of the hazardous material on him and to help prevent contamination of others. The 5 safety rules were key to proper handling of this incident. First responders protected themselves and approached the incident properly. The hazards were properly identified. The scene was secured. Further information and assistance was obtained. And the first responders avoided contact with any hazardous materials. When you're first on the scene of a hazardous materials incident, you're not alone.
Here at the headquarters of the Chemical Manufacturers Association in Washington, D.C., this emergency center is staffed and ready to help you. Chemtrec is the Chemical Transportation Emergency Center. It's a public service of the Chemical Manufacturers Association. Chemtrec is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on a toll-free number from anywhere in the continental United States. That number is 800-424-9300. Chemtrec can provide immediate advice for you at the scene of an emergency. Chemtrec communicators can also contact the shipper or manufacturer of the hazardous material involved, who in turn will provide more detailed information and may dispatch a response team to provide technical advice and assistance. These Chemtrec communicators can help you, but you also need to help them with some basic information when you call. If the vehicle involved is placarded, provide the identification number from the placard or orange panel on the shipping vehicle and the name of the product from the shipping papers if they're available. The shipping papers also contain information about the shipper and the point of origin and destination. If available, it's important to provide this information to Chemtrec. Also, describe the nature of the problem you have at the scene. When you do call Chemtrec, make every effort to keep the phone line open. Chemtrec can set up conference calls between your on-scene commander and experts who can advise you of how to handle your particular hazardous materials problem. Also, make sure that every word of the emergency instructions you get from Chemtrec is relayed to your crews exactly. Your safety could depend on one key word. The Emergency Response Guidebook should be your initial source of information at the scene. Chemtrec and the resources of the chemical industry are also available to you and should be used in an emergency. To ensure that a chemical expert arrives on the scene as quickly as possible to assist you in handling a chemical incident, Chemtrec can activate ChemNet or one of the other mutual aid programs for specific chemicals. Keep the Chemtrec phone number at hand, in your apparatus, and in your station and dispatch center. 800-424-9300. It can be a vital asset in a chemical transportation emergency or a hazardous materials incident. You are your most important resource in a hazardous materials incident. And the 5 basic safety rules: protection and safe approach, identifying the hazards, securing the scene, obtaining information and assistance, and safe site entry will give you the greatest margin of safety and the greatest chance to handle the problem. Careful attention to the basics of safe response to a hazardous materials incident can pay off, and that payoff could come anywhere in your community.
The potential for a hazardous materials incident is not limited to industrial areas. Look around your own community. Hazardous materials are everywhere. Every gas station has a potential problem. The grocery and convenience stores stock a wide range of flammable goods, and their built-in refrigeration systems can be the source of toxic fumes in an emergency. Hardware stores handle pesticides, flammables, corrosives, and hazardous materials of all kinds in all kinds of containers. Hazardous materials danger can exist in places you might not even think of. What about the chemistry lab in your local high school, or the water purifying system in your local swimming pool? Even the average home can be the source of hazardous materials danger. Common household items can spill, burn, or combine, creating dangers for potential victims and for would-be rescuers. Hazardous materials can even be found in your own firehouse, rescue, or police station. The important thing is to know your own community. Know the obvious sources of hazardous materials dangers, and be aware that the potential for a hazardous materials incident can exist almost anywhere. Pre-planning is an important aspect in preparing to be first on the scene of an accident. A good pre-plan not only identifies known hazard potentials in your community, but also includes information on community resources to be called on in an emergency. These may include trucks, heavy earth-moving equipment, sand, or other materials for diking or absorbing a material, and sources of neutralizing materials such as soda ash or limestone. Other resources to consider include emergency housing, assistance from the media, and access to weather data. You must also plan appropriate measures if evacuation is necessary, and the role of all agencies present on the scene must be clearly defined in advance. All of these resources can be important to you in protecting yourself and your community. The Chemical Manufacturers Association's Community Awareness and Emergency Response Program can assist you in planning for emergencies. And the Federal Emergency Management Agency offers information on organizing your community to deal with emergencies. For further information on safe emergency response to hazardous materials incidents, consult the information booklet included with this video program. The Chemical Manufacturers Association also has a lending library of training aids for emergency response personnel. These training aids can be obtained free of charge by contacting the Chemical Manufacturers Association in Washington, D.C. The Emergency Response Guidebook is available from the U.S. Department of Transportation. And in any hazardous materials incident, ChemTrek is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to provide assistance. The toll-free ChemTrek emergency number is 800-424-9300. A hazardous materials incident is one of the greatest challenges facing emergency response personnel. You may have to change your way of thinking and doing things when faced with a hazardous materials incident. Fast action is not as critical as safe action. The steps outlined in this presentation have been shown through experience to be effective in dealing with hazardous materials incidents of all kinds, and above all, they are known to be the safest way to deal with these incidents. And your safety is most important because you are the most important person in your community when you are first on the scene.
rarely occur. Should a chlorine leak occur, trained, properly protected personnel must respond immediately. This presentation has been prepared to train personnel responding to chlorine leaks in the proper use of the Chlorine Institute's Emergency Kit C. First, let's take a look at the proper dress and equipment necessary for those responding to most chlorine leaks. Proper dress includes a resistant plastic or rubber suit, hard hat, safety goggles, rubber gloves, and rubber boots. Proper equipment is a self-contained breathing apparatus with its own supply of contaminant-free air. In the case of a large volume leak, it may be necessary for emergency personnel to wear a one-piece acid suit. Note the wearer is completely covered with only the air tank located on the outside of the suit. For safety reasons, all of the procedures demonstrated in this training film will be performed on an empty chlorine tank car. Therefore, it is not necessary for the individuals shown to wear chlorine safety clothing and equipment. However, in an actual chlorine emergency, proper dress and equipment are a must. Most chlorine leaks involve one of the 5 valves located inside the tank car's protective dome. These valves are arranged the same on both tank cars and tank trucks. The 2 liquid angle valves are always parallel to the length of the tank car, while the 2 vapor valves are always transverse to the length of the tank car. The safety relief device is always in the center. Both the liquid valves and the vapor valves are Chlorine Institute approved standard angle valves. An angle valve may leak chlorine from the packing gland, from the valve seat, or from under the valve flange. The 5th valve, a standard Chlorine Institute safety relief device, may leak through the holes in the cap or from under the flange. Some chlorine leaks will be obvious. You will see a greenish yellow vapor. Most leaks, however, will require investigation to determine their origin. Simply squeeze a bottle of ammonia water just enough to force ammonia vapor close to the suspected area. Do not squirt liquid aqua ammonia on valves or fittings. Once you've located the leak, take steps to contain it immediately. These tools and devices are part of the Chlorine Institute's Emergency Kit C. They are designed to temporarily contain chlorine leaks on tank cars and tank trucks and are fabricated to Institute specifications. An instruction booklet is included as part of the emergency kit. The Chlorine Institute strongly recommends its use for application and maintenance of the devices and inspection of the kit. The exact location of a leak will determine the best way to control it. For instance, when an angle valve is leaking from the packing gland, the easiest way to control the leak is to simply close the valve. If closing the valve fails to stop the leak, the solution may be to tighten the packing gland nuts. Be sure each nut is tightened equally using wrench number 110 from the C-kit. If, however, an ammonia test shows that the valve is still leaking, apply the 6A hood from the kit. Installation procedures will be described later in this presentation. Another potential place for a chlorine leak is from the internal valve seat of an angle valve. To control this type of leak, tighten the valve. Remember, though, that this is a hand wheel. Too much leverage may damage the valve seat. The leak may also be controlled by screwing in the pipe plug. If an ammonia test shows these measures have failed to control the leak, apply the 6A hood. Another possible location for a leak on an angle valve is below the valve flange. Tightening the stud nuts may control the problem. Always tighten nuts on opposite sides of the valve before tightening the other two. If all other measures to stop the leak on an angle valve fail, the 6A hood may be the only way to contain it. The recommended procedure to install the 6A hood is as follows. First, remove the vent cap and open the vent valve on the 6A hood. This eliminates pressure buildup inside the hood while it is being installed. Next, fit the Viton gasket on the bottom of the hood. When ambient temperatures are low, it may be desirable to perform this operation in advance in a heated area. Remove the pipe plug from the leaking angle valve and place it on the valve flange. If the hood will not fit solidly over the angle valve because the pipe chain interferes, cut the chain with the C3 bolt cutter. Also, if the paint on the manway cover is loose or uneven, smooth the surface using the C2 paint scraper. Double check the 6A hood to make sure that the vent valve is open. Then place the hood over the valve. While one man is working with the hood, another man should be putting the yoke assembly together. With the hood positioned securely, place the yoke over the hood. The hooks on each end of the yoke must be hooked through the two portholes in the dome wall. The pointed end of the screw is set into the indentation on top of the hood. Now, tighten the screw over the hood. This seals the hood against the manway cover. Be sure that the hooks on the yoke assembly stay centered in the portholes. Finally, close the vent valve on the hood and test for leaks. Once you are sure the vent valve is not leaking, replace the cap. This is how the total assembly of hood and yoke should look. As chlorine pressure continues to build up inside the hood, test for possible chlorine leaks from the gasket. If there are any leaks, tighten the yoke screw further. Now let's see how to handle leaks from the valve in the middle of the housing, the safety relief device. Leaks from this valve can be detected in two places, through the holes in the cap or from under the valve flange. If an ammonia test indicates the presence of chlorine in the area of the cap, the 24A hood is the most efficient way to contain the leak. The 24A hood for safety valves is installed in a fashion similar to the 6A hood for angle valves. First, remove the vent valve outlet cap and open the vent valve. Attach the gasket to the bottom of the hood. If ambient temperatures are low, it may be desirable to perform this operation in advance, preferably in a heated area. Remove loose or uneven paint on the manway cover and place the hood over the safety valve. Now place adapter plate 10D on the top of the 24A hood so that the adapter plate's center hole lines up with the indentation on top of the 24A hood. After removing screw 10C from block 10B, place the block into the slot on the adapter plate, centering its threaded hole over the 24A hood indentation. Center the yoke assembly over the block, adapter plate, and hood. Place the hooks on each end of the yoke through the portholes in the protective housing. With the yoke assembly in place, thread the screw into the block, making certain that it seats in the indentation on the top of the hood. Tighten the screw until it draws the yoke assembly up tight against the protective housing. Next, alternately tighten the 4 10E screws in the adapter plate until they are all equally tight, forcing the hood to seal off the safety relief valve against the manway cover. If it is necessary to retighten the 10C screw, make certain that the 4 10E screws are also retightened. Now close the vent valve and test it for leaks. If there are no leaks, replace the vent valve cap. If an ammonia test reveals chlorine leaking from the gasket, tighten the 4 10E screws further. Again, check for leaks. This is how the completed assembly should look. Leaks under the valve flange may be controlled by tightening the stud nuts with the crowfoot wrench. Tighten the nuts on opposite sides of the valve first, then tighten the other two. If testing with ammonia indicates that tightening the nuts hasn't controlled the leak, apply the 24A hood using the procedures just described. Although unlikely, leaks can occur at the manway cover gasket. Use the wrench and wrench extension to tighten the manway cover studs and report the leakage immediately to your chlorine supplier. There you have it. The safest, most efficient way to control leaks from the valves of chlorine tank cars and tank trucks. But remember, these are only temporary measures. Prompt steps must be taken to empty and repair leaking tank cars and tank trucks. Emergency kits are designed by the Chlorine Institute to aid in the handling of chlorine leaks in chlorine shipping containers. Kits are fabricated to Institute specifications and may be purchased directly from the manufacturer. The Chlorine Institute provides training aids that can be used to train personnel who may need to use the kits. The information presented in this program is drawn from sources believed to be reliable. The Institute and its members, jointly and severally, make no guarantee and assume no liability either as to these instructions or the kits to which they apply. The user should be aware that changing technology may require a change in the devices themselves or in the instructions concerning their use. Appropriate steps should be taken to ensure that the material is current when used.
Hazardous materials incidents. The spectacular events receive spectacular media coverage. Everyone hears about them. But for every major incident, there are dozens around the country every day that affect local communities just like yours. The incident may be small. It may receive no outside attention, but there is still the potential for injury and property damage. As a first responder, the next hazardous materials incident could affect you and your community. What happens in the first few minutes of a hazardous materials incident can determine the outcome of the event. The first responder's actions are critical to the outcome of the incident and to the community involved. You are the key person when you are first on the scene.
Law enforcement officers, emergency medical services personnel. Regardless of your role in an emergency situation, the first responder on the scene